New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.
What's up, everybody? Leah Scabito, the Knit Time Show, giving you that Knits talk just in a knit of time. And yes, it is just me here today. JLS wanted to make sure that we had a platform to be able to talk about Media Day and everything that went down today, even though it wasn't very much. So, what was talked about? Obvious, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a protected first-round pick from Detroit were sent off in a trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, by NBA rules, only the players were allowed to discuss the trade, even though it had been made official. So Tom Thibodeau dodged multiple attempts by multiple reporters to try to talk about the trade, Karl-Anthony Towns specifically, and his impact with the team. Most of the players followed suit as well. Only Josh Hart said anything about a trade and gave his thoughts on the outgoing players and the incoming player in Karl-Anthony Towns, how he might fit into the Knicks offense and defense. But there were a lot of things you could pull from the conversations and the interviews, and I had a few notes discussing a few of those. Now, I'll start with what Jalen Brunson lamented on two of his very good friends with this team. One, a lifelong friend, and Dante DiVincenzo, a AAU teammate and a teammate with Villanova, championship teammate. His loss, obviously his groomsmen and his wedding as well, but also Julius Randle, a guy that, as all Knicks fans saw, formed a really strong bond between those two. We can all reflect on that one post game where Jalen Brunson went up to Julius Randle and gave him a long, extended hug. That kind of cemented those two being the one and two options on this team, but also the two leaders on this team that are going to take us to the promised land. Now Julius Randle is gone, but Jalen Brunson was not remiss to lament what those two guys meant to him and what they mean to Knicks fans. And I'll read the quote to you and what he said in today's Media Day interview. That was definitely tough. I'm thankful that Julius welcomed me with open arms here. That news, it was crazy. I'm really thankful for them and their friendships and everything and what they brought to this team. Really thankful I got to get a relationship with Julius. The memories we made together were really fun. And on Dante, he said he was a groomsman at my wedding. That should tell you everything you need to know about a relationship. Love him to death. Josh Hart also lamented that there was good and bad in what transpired over the last 72 hours. But I think all of us Knicks fans can agree that after we recognize the importance that Julius Randle specifically brought to this team, resurrecting us from the Fizdale era and bringing us into a playoff era and now a contention era, we can all agree that Karl-Anthony Towns adds a unique element to this roster that, in my opinion, and I tweeted this as soon as it happened, it makes us not just a contender, but a potential dynasty. Why do I say that? Well, I think what the Knicks players weren't able to talk about and what Tom Thibodeau wasn't able to talk about or chose not to is that Karl-Anthony Towns gives us a player now who plays more intuitively than Julius Randle. Randle is the type of player where you have to run specific plays for him. He's very high usage. He's very on ball. So you got to give it to him in his spots. And over the last couple of seasons, he's really minimized his shot diet to 7 or 8 spots on the floor where he feels like that he has a high percentage shot that either take his man off a dribble, back his man in, or face him up and pull up Jay in his face. Now, that being said, those shots take a long time. They're very mechanical. They're methodical. You got to give it to him. He's going to have a couple of head fakes. He's going to do his jab steps, maybe a fake turnaround, and then he's going to put up a shot. And that shot, more than likely, is going to be a low percentage shot for Julius Randle that he is one of maybe 10 or 12 guys in the NBA who's able to hit it. However, that all changes now that Karl-Anthony Towns is not just on the team, but specifically at the 5. We are now going to have a more intuitive offense that is really read and react, which Tom Thibodeau has always used that term to describe the type of offense he's wanted the team to run, but it hasn't always mirrored the product on the floor, especially with two high on-ball guys like Brunson and Randle leading the way. Karl-Anthony Towns, over 92% of his offensive shots were taken with 6 seconds or less once he caught the ball in whatever sweet spot he is. This is the type of guy who is a movement shooter at 7 feet tall on the perimeter that gives you unprecedented, maybe not since the days of Dirk Nowitzki, a big that is able to be in movement, in rhythm, can do a bat step, a side step, get the ball off and dribble handoff, catch it back, reposition. That type of offensive ability and that type of fluency on offense with Jalen Brunson is going to open everything up, not just for JB, but also for Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, Precious Achiuwa, and as Ebony noted in the last podcast, the combinations of Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle when they play together. No one passed to Rudy Gobert for made shots more than Karl-Anthony Towns last season. He was his highest assist man. I believe he gave Rudy Gobert 7 more assists than Anthony Edwards did within that starting 5 unit. What does this mean? This means the long-awaited for lob threat from Mitchell Robinson can finally be fully realized because you have someone and Karl-Anthony Towns, who I said on the last podcast, I really truly believe this. We're going to see better playmaking, better assist making from our big with him than we did even with Isaiah Hartenstein, who perfected the pick and roll and that short push shot with Jalen Brunson within the offense. I think Karl-Anthony Towns even surpasses iHeart because of his IQ combination with his physical ability and his offensive acumen. He's just a more skilled player. He is maybe the second or third most skilled big in the NBA, behind, of course, MVPs Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. Now, Karl-Anthony Towns is not going to allow for Mitchell Robinson when they're paired together, perhaps in closing or bench units, when those two are sharing a court, giving him lob threats. Imagine a 2-man screen game between him and Mitch either way, or Cat breaking down the offense and collapsing around him in the paint just to do a nice little dump-off pass to Mitchell Robinson or a floater for Mitch to slam it down as an alley-oop. That is an unstoppable weapon to be employed with this New York Knicks offense. Not to mention the spray-out abilities for 40% shooters in OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Jalen Brunson. Now, all these dynamics, of course, the players were not able to go in depth about because most of them chose, because it's such a tight-lipped, turnkey organization, not to comment until the deal was made official. But you can imagine how Tom Thibodeau is salivating over the possibility of all that Karl-Anthony Towns brings offensively and defensively. I truly don't know. I'm someone who thinks about the Knicks 24/7. Got no wife, got no kids, got a job. I work from home. I am constantly thinking about our Knicks and how they can be better and how we can win this chip. And I have not been able to devise a scheme to how any team, Boston, Philly, OKC, Denver, Minnesota, stops us on offense. You know Josh Hart is probably going to start. There's another thing that Tom Thibodeau said is that training camp will really determine who that fifth starter is. We can all pencil in JB, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns as a starter. But that fifth starter, right now, is up in the air. We discussed this on the last podcast. JLS went with Precious. I believe that Ebony went with Sims. I went with Moot. Moot was waived about an hour later. Then I rectified it with Shamit, but I really agree. At the end of the day, I thought about it. I think JLS is right. Precious is probably the best fit, but Tibbs being Tibbs, I think we can all guess Josh Hart will probably win the starting job coming out of training camp. So what does that mean? Since we didn't have a lot of commentary from our players and our coach beyond the typical platitudes of start from the day one, right? A clean slate. And JB, I got to be a better leader. And Bridges, anointing JB as the best player he's ever played with, and having a great point guard like JB, never really having a shooting big in his time with Brooklyn or Phoenix, and really being able to salivate over Karl-Anthony Towns and how he makes the game easier for everybody. There were things you could infer, and there's things off of those conversations, and also guesses that you can make on how this team will be changed. And one of those is we can finally trust the pass. We finally have a really core 5 of guys where there's not going to be a lot of question marks on, is this guy going to stay in the starting lineup? Like when Grimes got the starting job and then lost it, Fournier got the starting job and then lost it. I think right now, these 5 guys, including Josh Hart, are going to be the core of this team for the next 3 or 4 years as we go try to get not just one chip, but in my mind, multiple chips. Now, how does this all play out in the end game? Once Tibbs and the rest of the players are fully integrated with Karl-Anthony Towns and training camp starts, I think we're going to start seeing things that come out during those training camp practices that really tell you who the other 4 guys in the rotation are going to be. This wasn't commented on. Tibbs always says training camp and effort and performance will dictate who gets into the rotation. He's not one to make promises before the ball is thrown up in the air and the initial practices are commenced. He's someone who wants guys to earn their spots. But I think that we can come to a general agreement that Precious Achiuwa, and once he's healthy, Mitchell Robinson will be the two backup bigs unless trades are made. In the meantime, Jericho Sims will hold down the fort as the five. We've had many discussions. I'm all the way out on him. I hope in a backup role he's able to provide some defense on the perimeter at an even better rate than he's previous has been, and also be able to at least do some set better screens and roll to the basket as a lob threat in the same way that we hope for Mitchell Robinson. But I think there's two other positions. Deuce Bride, even though Tiz views him more as a two guard opposed to a lead guard, I think he's going to be the backup point guard. I don't see Cameron Payne, certainly not a rookie like Tyler Pollock, as much as I would love that, crack a 9-man rotation. I think Landry Shamet was kept over Moot for a reason, over Okiki for a reason. I think Tibbs really loves his shooting. If memory serves correct, I think he's a 38% career shooter, made the playoffs with multiple teams, including the Clippers and the Phoenix Suns. He's a guy I think that come off the bench and not in the same volume and not in the same catch and shoot percentages as Dante DiVincenzo, but in spurts can provide perimeter shooting and spacing around Mikal Bridges, who I think will be leading that second unit as the focal point of the offense. And with Mikal Bridges, because of his downhill ability, you need some shooting. Precious and Sims don't give you much of that. Neither does Mitchell Robinson when he returns, which makes it key that Shamet's shooting is positioned next to Bridges in that offense to allow for Bridges to have some open lanes into the hoop, allow him to draw fouls, but also to be able to trust the pass when it comes to spraying it out to his teammates that he'll be playing alongside as the first option with the second unit. Now, there's a few other things that I think I wanted that are needed to be touched on based on some of the cryptic messaging of Tom Thibodeau. One of those is starting from square one. And I like that. A lot of the plays, and not just the plays, but the mentality of the New York Knicks last year were predicated upon Julius Randle's major role within the offense and the defense. Now that he's gone, brand new wrinkles have to be introduced to accommodate the new player in Karl-Anthony Towns and the absence of two major rotational pieces in Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So what does that look like? I think you're going to see an emphasis on the multi-dimensional players we have on defense. I think you're going to see Josh Hart and OG Anunoby be more of off-ball defenders, causing chaos as free safeties on the court. I think Mikal Bridges is going to be our best on-ball defender. He's going to be the one that we stick on the Kyrie Irvings, who torched OG Anunoby last year when they played the Mavericks in Dallas. I was at that game, unfortunately. And other guys like Steph Curry or Jamal Murray. It's going to be Bridges. But we have an extra tool in the tool shed now. With Julius Randle, we're always like crossing fingers. We just hoped that he was able to produce defensively a defensive effort consistently. And in my opinion, he never did, except for that month in January, was really the only time we had a 30-day period where Randle was fully engaged defensively for a long stretch of time. Otherwise, it ebbed and flowed. If his offense wasn't there, he wasn't always locked in on defense. There's a lot of ball watching, a lot of gradually walking back to the defensive end of the floor, not with Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns also presents another ability we have not had with Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein, which is switching. And that was something that Tom Thibodeau actually mentioned in his press interview, is that the Knicks are going to see a lot more switching. He didn't mention Cat because he couldn't yet, but he mentioned Hart, Bridges, and OG as three basically Swiss Army knives. Shout out Lance Thomas, David Fizdale. Three guys that can all switch on ball, and you can add Karl-Anthony Towns to that cachet. Now, what does that mean with Jalen Brunson? Yes, he can be a cone if he's not drawing charges, but you can hide him on defense under the defensive genius of Tibbs and allow those four guys to switch on everyone. Need proof? Watch Game 7 last year in the second round between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Karl-Anthony Towns guarded Nikola Jokic on an island the entire game. Never called for a double, and Coach Finch never threw a double. Karl-Anthony Towns guarded him the entire time. And when they tried to switch off him and Jamal Murray down on Karl-Anthony Towns, guess what? Karl-Anthony Towns guarded Jamal Murray on an island by himself and shut everybody down. To me, that was one of the most key things in thinking about what can Karl-Anthony Towns do on the defensive end for this New York Knicks team? And I think a lot of the defensive assumptions about him are dead wrong. Let me give you a few stats here to support my argument. In the last 3 seasons, the Timberwolves have posted a net rating of 4.78 with Cat and Ant sharing the floor. They posted a 5.54 with Cat on the floor and Anthony Edwards off. Those are incredible numbers alone. It gets better. When Cat is off the floor, they posted a defensive rating of 114.77. When Cat was on the floor, 116.31. But it's also about the eye test, as I mentioned, guarding Joker on an island in Game 7. How did Joker do? In Game 7, 13-28, 2 for 10 for 3. Only shot 7 free throws, 3 turnovers, posted a -9, and most importantly, Minnesota got the win. And even more so, Karl-Anthony Towns sealed the game with a dunk with 45 seconds left on the clock to ensure that Minnesota would come back from 20 and win Game 7 and go on to the conference finals. That's no small feat. Now, there's a lot of criticism that you can levy toward Karl-Anthony Towns. Is his voice too high? Absolutely. Can it be a little zesty? Absolutely. Can he be a little arrogant and think that he's the best shooter of all time? Absolutely. Does he shoot too much instead of getting his big ass in the paint? Absolutely. But there are a lot of things that are attributed to him as a loser, not a winner, that I think are unfair. With Karl-Anthony Towns on the Knicks, he's really the third option in my mind, because they're not going to run a lot of action and high usage ISO sets for Karl-Anthony Towns. Again, it's going to be more intuitive. I think Mikal Bridges will have more ISO sets and high usage on-ball opportunities running with the second unit than Karl-Anthony Towns will. A lot of Karl-Anthony Towns opportunities are come behind the break in fast break threes, launching from the perimeter. Again, 92% of his shots came within 6 seconds of a catch. With the first attempt of a Julius Randle catch, he's still doing his third jab step. So we're in a different sphere right now offensively on what Karl-Anthony Towns can bring. And I think he doesn't have to be the same leader. He won't have the same amount of pressure that he had in Minnesota before Anthony Edwards got there. And I think it'll be a more seamless fit with a point guard of such high IQ and winning mentality of Brunson that is going to be a joy for Karl-Anthony Towns to play with. Him and Tibbs are both older, both wiser, both have learned from their mistakes. And I think we're going to see both of them unlock the best in each other. Hearing Tom Thibodeau even say the word switching on defense, a defensive scheme he has never embraced throughout his coaching career in 3 stops, that to me was an automatic positive optic. Also, saying that the Knicks were going to run small with a stretch 5 and go 5 out. That's something he's never embraced. Granted, he hasn't always had the tools to do so. We saw Karl-Anthony Towns play center with him in Minnesota, and it led to the playoffs. I think employing him now, when he's an even more fully realized player, especially on the defensive end, will make the Knicks even more dangerous and hard to stop, period. This all comes down with Jalen Brunson being a leader. And those are one of the things you can bank on the most with this team. That there's a lot of 1A guys out there. There's a lot of guys that are self-proclaimed superstars. Jalen Brunson doesn't care about any of that, and he said so in his press conference. He said, it's not about what happened Game 7. It's not about last season. It's a clean slate, and we got to start from square one, mimicking the words of Tom Thibodeau, which makes him such a perfect avatar for Tom Thibodeau's coaching philosophy, is that he embodies his mentality of, it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It only matters the game here and now, which means you take a game against the Boston Celtics as seriously as you take a game against the Charlotte Hornets or the Charlotte Bobcats. It doesn't matter. And I love that our star player and our head coach share that same mentality moving forward. So even though Tom Thibodeau was barred from being able to say too much about Karl-Anthony Towns, and the players outside Josh Hart chose not to say too much about Karl-Anthony Towns, there wasn't much to pull from directly from this media day, but there was a lot to infer, and there was a lot to think about as well, specifically with the interview with Tom Thibodeau, mentioning both going 5 out and switching on defense. I think it presents a lot of interesting matchups, and for the imagination of Knicks fans across the world to spend the next couple of weeks on as train camp continues, and what this team can look like. My prediction, 60 burger. I think we're going to win 60 games this season. I think we're going to be first in the East. I think Tom Thibodeau is going to win Coach of the Year. Leon Rose will win Executive of the Year. I think that this team is going to win a championship. Jalen Brunson has the best shot he's ever had of being MVP because he is now being surrounded by the perfect talent to enhance his positives and hide his deficiencies. This is a team built for Jalen Brunson's strengths and weaknesses. No longer are we trying to cobble together Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson to try to make it work, to hope that Randle shoots efficiently, to hope that Jalen Brunson's percentage from three is above 40%. This is a team built for and around Jalen Brunson. And I think that's going to be a best case scenario for MVP candidacy for Brunson to go from fifth in MVP voting to number one, man. There's a lot to be excited about, Knicks Nation. So, that being said, double blessings to everyone out there tuning in. Double blessings to the Time Show. My man Jay Ellis, Fritz Alcindor, Ryan G, and Ebony. Much love to you all. This is Leah Stabito saying peace. Much love.
York, New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.